The Fair Housing Act was introduced in 1968 to protect vulnerable classes and prevent discrimination based on characteristics such as race, gender, disability. Again, race, color, national origin, religion, sexual, sex, whatever your sex is, boy, girl, whatever, family status, or a disability. You cannot be discriminated against those. And let's add also animals, service animals, emotional support animals, and the assistance programs. You cannot disqualify a tenant based on where they get their money to pay the rent. You can't. So if it's Section 8, you have to have some type of formula and always do it the same way. So. Hey, what's up all of my real estate peeps? This is Brian Lucier with another episode of the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, Golden Nuggets, where we will take a tip, tactic, or technique and unpack it for you to understand that you can implement and add to your toolbox as a property manager, landlord, entrepreneur, real estate investor. We're here to try to help you and give you a better grasp on how to do the best operating practices you can for your business. So today I want to unpack something very important in your screening process or your advertising or just in your showings as you have a tenant or a prospect candidate come into one of your rental units. What to look out for in housing discrimination. You really want to avoid this. So we're going to dig in on some of the different things that you need to look for and avoid and just set up some best practices. So just a laundry list of laws that you should be looking up under the Massachusetts Council of Discrimination or your state, wherever it is. Mass General Law 151B is the anti-discrimination laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Then you've got Mass General Laws 272, subsection 92A, 98, 98A. Those are public accommodations law. Then you've got Mass General Law 199A, which is your lead paint law. In addition, MCAD, Massachusetts Council Against Discrimination, is authorized by the statute under access of 804 CMR 2.0, the discrimination in housing. So there's a lot of laws out there that you need to be aware of. And these laws protect you from being differently or unfairly based on your membership of a protected class. This would be race, sex, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, family status, handicap, a disability, a veteran or military service, your landlord or property management or a condo association. The laws prohibit unfair treatment based on your membership of a protected class. And these are some of the protected classes. Again, disability discrimination, service animals or emotion support animals, families with children or family status, lead paint, public assistance, or discriminatory advertisements. These are the things that are going to get you in trouble. And even if you've got the best intentions of a landlord, you got to be careful. Even if you make a joke that can be deemed as discriminatory, it can be harmless, but it can be taken to a point, a whole nother level, where you could end up having to answer for your actions or what you may have said. Let's go into some of these a little deeper. Disability discrimination. It is illegal to refuse to rent, sell, or deal with a person or otherwise deny a unit or make it unavailable due to a disability or handicap. This includes discriminating in the terms, conditions, privileges, the the sale, the rental, or the occupancy or services falsely representing that a unit is not available, limiting access. You can't do these things. It's just bad customer service, bad relationship, and it's bad for your references for your buildings, your reputation. You cannot ask an applicant whether the applicant or the applicant's family or any friend or associate has a disability. You can't even ask. A landlord may not inquire about the nature or severity of the disability, and you cannot require for the production of medical records. You just can't ask for any of this stuff. Landlords should additionally not attempt to assess whether an applicant is capable of living independently or whether the applicant meets essential eligibility requirements as per the terms of the tenancy or the lease. You can't do it. Public housing must provide reasonable accommodations and modifications based on a person's need with their disability. Yes, you got to be careful on that one. Also, look up the Americans with Disabilities Act and how that's integrated into your state law. Service animals and emotional support animals, these are a protected class. Service animals and emotional support animals are common requests for reasonable accommodation in housing of a person's disability. Where I used to go to church, there was a gentleman who had a huge Great Dane, and that Great Dane he was able to lean on to get around and walk. And that absolutely was part of his existence. He needed that animal to be able to get around. Service animals and emotional support animals are animals who provide assistance or emotional support to an individual with a disability. There are no licensing or certification requirements for service animals, so don't ask about it. This one, I've got a nice little story on this one. Families with children or familial status, your family status, it is illegal to refuse to sell or rent a dwelling to a family based solely on the fact that the family has children. Refusal to rent or lease any accommodations to any person because a person has a child or because children will occupy the premises is illegal. You can't do it. The law prohibits unfair or different treatment of families with children. In addition, it is illegal to refuse to sell or rent a dwelling or treat someone differently based solely on their familial status. And I know a landlord who got in trouble once. They had college rentals, and that's fine. You can do college rentals. But where he made his mistake was in his advertising. His public advertising, he was advertising college rentals for students, which unintendedly excluded families. So there at MCAD and some of these other organizations are called testers, and they look for these type of ads. The testers called up this one ad and they said, hey, I'm really interested in your unit. You know, it looks like it would be great for me and my family. And unknowingly, I'd say innocently, but maybe not so much, the landlord was answering saying, no, I really don't want to put a family in there. I rent to students. It's near the college area, and I'm looking for students. The phone hung up. That tester took the file, gave it to the desk right next to him. That person called, same thing, and this happened with 3 different testers, and the landlord denied 3 different times on family status. So what happened? The landlord got a package from NCAD. The document was about this thick, and he called me up. He knew I did property management, and through the Landlord Association, I might be able to help. So he came into my office, and he dropped this document on my desk, and it made a loud thud. And he said, Brian, what do I do? And I looked at it, and he told me the story, and I says, Mr. Landlord, write a big check. And that's what happened. He had a lawsuit for $30,000. And it wasn't even to a particular person because they were testers. This went specifically to MCAD to fund their legal aid and other stuff. So lead paint, that's another one that we have to look out for. It is illegal to refuse or rent a dwelling due to the presence of lead paint in the dwelling. And this happens all the time with us, right? We'll put an ad out there, we'll get someone interested in renting that ad, they'll go through the whole process, and then they'll ask us, is it de-leaded? And we 100% need to be honest and truthful with that answer. If we know it's de-leaded, we have to supply them with the lead reports, whatever it is, a letter of compliance, or if we're renting it for a landlord and we have no records from that landlord, we need to disclose that and say that we have no records of lead paint. We're not saying it's lead-free, we're saying that we have no records. And if we need to, we have to get the place inspected, de-leaded, especially if they qualify as a tenant with children. And a landlord cannot evict or refuse to rent or lease to families with children under the age of 6 years old due to lead paint compliance. You need to make it compliant. So what do, right? The lead law requires the removal or covering of lead paint hazards for homes built before 1978. So your best bet or strategy as a landlord is to, when you buy a property, find out if it's de-leaded or buy properties that were built after 1978. You know, that's probably the easiest way. And when you are buying a property, absolutely ask for lead certs. And if they tell you that they have no knowledge of it, you can go on to the Massachusetts Lead Safe Homes database and just look up the address. In Massachusetts, it's split to the old database and the new database. But you're required to remove lead paint from your rentals. The next point we want to cover is public assistance. We get this all the time. Same scenario. Someone will see the ad, look at it, want to rent it, or even before they look at the ad, they'll say, do you accept Section 8? Do you accept home base? Do you accept RAF? Do you accept any type of rental assistance? By law, you must accept it. You cannot say, and I've talked to landlords we don't manage for, but they'll say, oh no, we don't rent to Section 8. It's like, that is so illegal. You can't do that. You can't say that. You should never go on record that that's your status. The best answer you can have is we follow, here's the answer. Somebody asks, do you accept Section 8? Your answer is we follow all fair housing rules and regulations based on housing. That's it. And then you stick to the letter of the law and you do that. I already mentioned a little bit discriminatory advertisements. This one is so subjective. Like, would you believe you could get in trouble for actually saying walk-in closets in your ad? I know, you're rolling your eyes right now because you're saying that's what they're called, walk-in closets, because they're big and they're spacious. Well, take a tip. Call them big and spacious, because calling them walk-in, even though that's what it's called, assumes that the person does not have a disability and they can walk. So someone could read that and say, well, I can't walk. Does that mean you're not going to rent to me because it's a walk-in closet? I know it sounds so uncommon, not common sense, but it's real, right? And you don't want to make those jokes. You don't want to say no Section 8 or no kids in your advertising. That is a red flag, and the testers that are out there for fair housing are looking for you. They want to find you and they want to have a discussion with you, and it may cost you a lot of money. Let's move on a little bit here. Let's see, got some more notes here that I want to share with you. So landlord discrimination against tenants when screening is a serious issue. You need to know the Fair Housing Act. You should definitely look that up. Something that I've heard happen, and this was, I think, a $15,000 lawsuit. A woman was being shown a unit, and the staircase going up to the unit was very narrow. And the landlord said, look, you know, this unit would work for you, but let me show you this unit that might work better for you. I think it was a first floor or whatever it was. There was one unit that the tenant wanted to see, and the landlord said, let me show you this one instead. That's called steering, and you can't do that either. If you have a unit for rent, you need to show that unit to every prospect who wants to see that. If you have two different units, avoiding showing one of those units is not good because that's steering. You need to show both units. Let's dig in a little bit deeper there. So the Fair Housing Act was introduced in 1968 to protect vulnerable classes and prevent discrimination based on characteristics such as race, gender, disability. Again, race, color, national origin, religion, sexual, sex, whatever your sex is, boy, girl, whatever, family status, or a disability. You cannot be discriminated against those. And let's add also animals, service animals, emotional support animals, and the assistance programs. You cannot disqualify a tenant based on where they get their money to pay the rent. You can't. So if it's Section 8, you have to have some type of formula and always do it the same way. So housing discrimination examples, we've given you a few of those, but racial discrimination, you know, preferring one ethnicity over another. And this can work in the reverse. We have some landlords who rent primarily to a given nationality, be it Portuguese or Brazil because they speak Portuguese, because everyone in the building speaks Portuguese. Well, that's reverse discrimination. You have to be careful on that as well. And there are some areas that have very high densities of Vietnamese, Brazilian, whatever it would be. Be careful there because you can't isolate and only rent to that class either, because now it's reverse discrimination against everybody else. Age discrimination, right? If someone is of the legal age of 18 and they want to rent your unit, they have every right to. And on the other side of that, if they're retired or elderly, they have every right as well. There's no age bracket where you can say you don't want to rent to them. Gender discrimination. Let's talk about this one. So you can't say, I only rent to women, or I only rent to men, or I only rent to this class, or only rent to this. You can't do that. The only thing you can do is if it is an owner-occupied room that you're renting. For example, if you're going to house hack a building that you live in, you've got an extra bedroom and you want to rent out that bedroom. If you are owner-occupied in that property, for example, if you're a woman renting a room in your house, you are allowed under the Fair Housing Act to specify that you would prefer a roommate who is another woman for issues of safety or comfort. We already talked about Section 8 discrimination. You cannot discriminate against Section 8. That is a protected class. Discrimination against disabilities, we talked about that as well. So we gave you a lot of information here, and just be careful. So what's the best defense against doing screening or housing or renting? To avoid discrimination, use a standardized rental process. That's it. If you get nothing else out of this video, have a documented process. Prevention is the best policy when it comes to rental discrimination. You should have a standardized rental application and screening process that you use for every prospective tenant. And again, this can work in the reverse as well. The time that you don't use that rental application or your screening process, then everybody else who had to fill out that rental application was discriminated against. So even if we have a tenant, an existing tenant who wants to move a roommate in, we say, great, but you have to fill out the rental application, you have to meet our criteria, you have to do everything you would normally do as if you were renting that unit all by yourself without the roommate involved. So you have to make sure that to check that neither the application nor the screening process breaches any of the fair housing laws or discrimination guidelines either. So a standardized process might look something like this. Again, check your state laws. The nolo.com website is great for landlord tenant law books and stuff like that. Create your rental listing based on fair practices. Don't say 15 minutes from a synagogue or 15 minutes from a church or great for students. Avoid all that. Be, how do I say, as colorblind as possible in your ad. You want to list the amenities, that it's close to shopping, close to downtown, a great commute, close to commuter rails, but you want to avoid those specific things like great for students, near several religious organizations. What if I'm an atheist, right? Then I could be offended by that my thought is you're preferring religious background people. And then the next thing to do is set minimum pre-screening criteria. These should be factors that, such as rental history, income. We want to do a income to rent ratio to make sure the income covers the rent so many times. Employment, and this would be employment records. How long have you had that job or something like that? Because again, you can't discriminate on where the income is coming from. Pets. Now, I say pets. Pets are different in my world from emotional support or service animals. Animals are required. Pets are pets. You know, your goldfish, your iguana, your kitty cat, your puppy, you know, the family friend that doesn't provide a service. That's a pet. An animal provides a service. And again, you can't ask what it is. Smoking, right? You don't have to rent to smokers. The number of tenants moving in. Check your municipalities, state building code. I believe it's, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I think it's 120 square feet for the first person in the bedroom, then an additional 80 square feet for each additional person. So if your rental unit does not accommodate 4 or 5 people sleeping there, just based on the municipality CRM code, then you can say, based on the size of the apartment, I can only allow X amount of people to live in that unit. A criminal record. You got to be careful on this one because there are programs to get ex-convicts back into society. And if you want to honor and support that, that's great. But you also want to be careful as well. A sexual predator in a building that has children could cause a lot of damage to your reputation, really bad faith and bad trust with your tenants who have children. And you have to check these things. If you deny an applicant, put the reason on the denial into writing, okay? And then you want to run a full screening report, a credit report. We have to get licensed at Bel Air to use Experian. I think every 2 or 3 years they have to come in, check out our facilities, make sure we check all the boxes. But run a tenant screening report on all of the qualifying tenants and select the best candidate based on the allowable factors. Notice I say qualifying tenants, because honestly, if we're paying for background and credit checks on every single applicant, I mean, I was just looking at the board, we have over 340 applicants this month. I mean, just doing the math, that would be thousands of dollars spent on background checks. So have your screening criteria set up first, and then pre-qualify the people who you would want to rent to, and then start to do your deeper background. Okay, I hope this was helpful. Fair Housing Act, avoiding rental discrimination, and just having a system in place that you always do, always the same time. Make it cookie cutter that this is what we do, ABC, have policies and procedures in place, and never step out of the lines. That's when you can lose a limb on discrimination. Rental housing discrimination is real. And, there have even been cases where landlords with the best of intentions have stepped into something that they didn't mean to step into innocently, and rental housing discrimination caught them, and it was unpleasant, and it really hurts when that happens, especially if you're trying to do the right thing. So have your rental criteria written down, stick to it always. Have a written rental application, have your policies in place for income, pets, smoking, whatever it is, and always stick to the same blueprint for every applicant in every one of your rentals. Whew, wow, this was a deep one. So here we are talking about rental housing discrimination. I hope that this is helpful. I hope you learned a lot about what you can, can't, shouldn't say, shouldn't do, and rack this one up to another episode. This is Brian Lucier again from the Why Not Real Estate Podcast Golden Nugget, trying to help you be a better landlord, entrepreneur, property owner, or property manager. To all of my real estate peeps, wishing you the best. We're signing off, and we'll see you on the next one.